Imagine working every day in a culture that looks, sounds, and feels like this. Trust, truth, and psychological safety are the norm. Leaders lead with integrity. They tell the truth, they listen to the truth, and they take risks. Imagine understanding your culture so deeply that as a group and as an entity, you could guide it. You could guide your culture forward into its best and most brilliant state. Now imagine that's your culture. What would that be like? Brilliant cultures are systems that proactively adapt to change in ways that decrease stress, inspire learning, and promote organizational health. They're cultures that really bring out the invention, the energy, and the intelligence in people. And I believe that if we can actually change the culture of our businesses, we can change the world. And that's one of the reasons I created the Cultural Brilliance System, was to give organizations an opportunity in a step-by-step way to literally transform their cultures into something I call brilliant cultures. One of the things I noticed as I've worked in organizations for almost the past 20 years as both a consultant and executive coach is how much potential is left on the table in almost every company I go into. And a lot of that potential is in the people, but more importantly, a lot of that potential lies in the culture itself. Because the organization, despite in most cases best intentions, has not been able to really get to the core of the brilliance of its particular culture, to understand what makes the culture tick, to understand it in a really deep way so that they can make conscious and intentional changes to the cultural design. And that's what we're really talking about with the Cultural Brilliance System, is how can we consciously design and intentionally integrate a brilliant culture, a culture that proactively adapts to change so that people's stress levels decrease, they're inspired to learn on a daily basis, and the overall health of the organization is optimal. We create brilliant cultures by using a system that I've created called the Cultural Brilliance System. The Cultural Brilliance System is a 3-phase process designed to help you deeply understand your culture, design the culture you really need, and then help you integrate that within your organization. So the first phase of the process is called authenticity. And this is really doing a deep dive into understanding how your culture actually operates. And sometimes what happens with culture is that we think we know all about our own cultures, right? And that's understandable. But what we find out in the authenticity phase is that there are often beliefs and some underlying assumptions operating in the culture and driving a lot of behavior in the culture that no one in the culture really actually knows about. So the authenticity process is really getting to the root and the bottom of how your culture operates, and that's the good, bad, and the ugly, whatever is true for your culture. And then from there say, wow, these are some great parts of our culture that really make us brilliant. We want to keep these. And there are some aspects of our culture that we realize are actually holding us back. So in the authenticity phase, we really look at the elephant, so to speak, square in the eyes and say, what's the truth about how this culture operates? The second phase of the process is what I call adaptogen design. And adaptogen design is where we really look at designing the path forward. How do you move from the culture you have right now to the culture you need and want to have? So design is simply another word for path. What is the path forward to the culture you want and need? Now, why do I call it adaptogen design and not just design? So adaptogens are natural herbal substances that are used in the US and other countries around the world. And when we ingest them, they actually help regulate our bodily systems. So they decrease stress. They help return our systems to health. Maca is an example of it. Ginseng is another example of an adaptogen herb. And there are many, many, many others. But the word adaptogen is a really interesting one because the word adapto is Greek and it means to adapt, as you would expect. And the suffix gen means to produce. So these are adapting and producing cultures. And that's really what we want in the 21st century, isn't it? We want cultures that will adapt and produce in ways that decrease stress and regulate our organizational systems. So once we've gone through the adaptogen design process and really looked at designing the culture at 3 levels, which are mindset, behavior, and systems or structure, we then move to the third phase of the process, which is aware integration. And during aware integration, we take our design, our cultural design, and decide how we're functionally going to implement it within the organization. Now, interestingly, what happens in this 3-phase process As we start in the authenticity phase, some of the adaptogen design begins to emerge, right? And we take the adaptogen design that's emerging and we formalize it, and we try it out, we prototype it, we make sure it works. And as we're doing that, what we start to notice is, in fact, some of the ways that we'll implement it and integrate it start to emerge. So when we get to aware integration, we actually know a lot about the culture, the design, and how we might want to implement, integrate some of these cultural design changes. So we want to bring in the new mindsets that we've designed, the new behaviors, and any new systems or processes or structures, and intentionally and consciously implement and integrate them into the organization. So the cultural design itself is in alignment with where your company wants to go. So we're already, by the time we get to aware integration, people have learned a lot. People have learned a lot about themselves, their culture, and their organization. And they're much more self-aware, and they're much more aware of the culture. So when they come to this final phase, they can do so with a lot of consciousness and intention.